First of all, thank you everybody for coming. Recent events of violence, not just in this city but around the country, is something that we've all have a right to be quite concerned about. The impacts on this community have just been overwhelming. I've talked to you all recently about that recent homicide on Garden, where those kids were in the car. That was just devastating for me to have to see children have to deal with that. And we've got a generation now that has to grow up with an experience like that. And we've been talking amongst ourselves all along, but I've just decided, you know, enough's enough. We're going to do whatever we can right now. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that in a few minutes, but for right now I want to introduce the president of Rochester City Council, Loretta Scott, to make some comments, and then she will be followed by Vice President Willie Lightfoot. President Scott.
Thank you, Chief. I'm here today to add another perspective, one that calls on our community, our parents, grandparents, aunties, uncles, to help us, help the Rochester Police Department in putting an end to this madness. I believe that the police are doing their very best. I also believe that they could use some help. I want the state and the nation and the president and everybody else. I want all the help that we can get. But I definitely want the citizens of Rochester to step up, because I can't think of any one of these horrendous crimes that wasn't seen by somebody. We have enough eyes, enough phones, and enough cameras that these things were seen, and nobody's talking. There's no excuse for that. That silence makes them complicit. They're being a part of the violence and a part of the madness. So my primary purpose today is to ask for help from the community. I want to acknowledge the presence of my council colleagues, Council Member Michael Patterson, Council Member Lachey Harris, Council Member Jose Pia, and the Council Vice President Lightfoot is going to address you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you to Chief Harriet Sullivan, and thank you to Madam President Scott, and to my colleagues who are here, and to all the officers that are serving and here with us today. I just want to simply just add to the sentiments of Madam President that for the call for help from the community, as well as I want to say that the Rock Against Gun Violence Coalition, who have been working hand in hand in partnership with many of our partners here in the community, as well as Councilmember Lachey Harris, who was a part of that Rock Against Gun Violence Coalition. We've been working tremendously hard to try to come up with ways to combat this violence, and we're going to stand hand in hand in partnership with the Rochester Police Department and working with the community to eradicate this violence within our community. So I just want to let everyone know, and especially our men and women in blue, that you are supported, and that needs to be clear, that needs to be understood, that we have to work together as a community, and these men and women in blue are a part of our community. So it's important, it's an imperative community. Not only do we step up and help, as the president has stated, but let's make sure that we work in partnership and collaboration. And I call upon, as Madam President has said, and I reiterate, that our federal partners, our state partners, our county partners, we all have to come to the table and collectively and intentionally come to combat this violence within our community. It's not one department, it's not one entity, it's all of us, and it affects all of us and our families. And I want to take the time out to honor and respect those victims and those who have lost their lives, and families who are hurting as a result of the devastating trauma that they have experienced. And I want to take the time to just say we're praying for you, and we understand, and we're here to make sure that we're providing services for these families that have been impacted by this violence. And I just wanted to say I support the police chief in all her efforts and what she's doing. Thank you.
Thank you, President and Vice President. First, I want to thank all of our council members that have come in a show of support. I also want to thank our staff. We've got a few folks up here, folks from our homicide unit, our command staff, our investigatives section. We also have Rosa Ford, who's our local supervisory FBI agent. And I'm going to have her come up and say a few words in a little bit. So this is something I've given some thought to, looked at it for a bit, and since last year I had our staff, our analysts, working with the district attorney's office to look at what our outcomes have been when it comes to people who have gun and violence law violations on their records. And so what I've seen from this is that in many cases, those people are not in jail. They're not in jail. One particular case that really stood out for me, and Captain Umbrino had brought it to my attention, and he will tell you that when he first shared that information with me, I didn't believe him. I did not believe a person with this sort of history was not being retained in custody. And I'm not pointing any fingers at anybody, but what I'm saying is if something's broke, then we all have to come together and fix it. So he shared with me, and I looked at the video. There was an incident where someone was on video using a gun and pistol whipping two women. What he shared with me is that person was had been released and was out on a murder second charge. And then after we'd put that person into custody, he was released again. And I just thought, yeah, no. So I don't, like I said, I didn't get into the details. I didn't care. We just needed to come up with a different strategy to try to deal with that. And so, looking at the data, some of the things I looked at were the percentages of people who were released on criminal possession of a weapon charges. And the percentages, I mean, you had a good 60% who, on an average, but particularly in 2020, that were out on bail charges that were $5,000 or less. And so at the end of the day, I don't know which court or which judge, I'm not pointing fingers at it. I had a meeting with Judge Dorn, as I'd mentioned to you all before. He sat down with me, we went over to criminal procedure law. Judges have to follow certain processes, I get it, but my feeling is, however we have this structured, we just have to do something different. So my decision was to, when we have cases like this, these sort of shootings and weapons charges, to go after them federally. We want to work with the U.S. Attorney. I've spoken with James Kennedy, the U.S. Attorney based out of Buffalo. He's coming here next week. We're going to have a meeting, he and I and Sandra Dorley. I've also had chats with her about that as to how we're going to move this process forward. We have incidents where our major crimes in this last shooting, I mean, talk about being on overload. In one case, the lieutenant had to go home and try to get some sleep, and I don't think he was there an hour, and he had to turn around and come back in. And so, like I said, we just have to do things differently. I've spoken with the Sheriff's Department, Monroe County Sheriff's. I want to thank Sheriff Baxter for his willingness to partner with us and work on these solutions. The New York State Police, they've overwhelmingly stepped up to offer resources. The U.S. Marshals are also going to be working with us on this. And like I said, the goal here for me is simple, that when people are arrested for those violent gun-type incidences, I want them to stay in jail. It's that simple. And so, again, we had an earlier meeting today, the Supervisory Agent Ford and I, we talked for about an hour, kind of, going over some of the issues we're dealing with around here from a federal law enforcement perspective, but also ours locally. I, again, want to stress that when I went to the Mayor Warren, and to our council people, they were immediately supportive and said, we have to do something. And so that's my position. I'm going to work hard on this because I feel it's the right thing to do. And I want us to be able to have our kids be able to come outside for school recess, to be able to come outside again without worrying about whether the kids are going to be shot or attacked. And so what I'd like to do is for Agent Ford, you want to come up and make a few comments?
I could just say.
Come on up. Yeah, they need to. Yes, please. Go ahead.
Well, I'm honored that I was asked here to speak. And on behalf of the SAC, the Special Agent in charge of the Buffalo Division, Stephen Bolongia, the FBI is in full support of partnering with RPD as well as our ATF partners in mitigating and disrupting the violence in Rochester. So it takes the whole community.
Yes.
It takes all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your support, Agent. There's one bad lady, so I'm very happy to know her. I'd like to invite up our Deputy Chief of Operations, David Smith. He's going to talk to you a little bit more in specifics about our strategy. DCO?
Thanks, Chief. Just before I get into what I had prepared, I just kind of want to touch base on what the Chief was saying about the Major Crimes Unit. You see on TV the first 48. That's real. I mean, the Major Crimes Unit for the past couple of weeks has literally been bunking in the building. I mean, they sleep, they shower here, and they work their cases, so I can't say enough about them. The past couple times I've been up here, I've been talking about what initiatives we were going to be doing. I thought today I would touch on some of our successes for the past month from the hardworking men and women of the Rochester Police Department. So in chronological order, going back to June 5th, and this is again talking about how the Chief directed that our resources go into targeting known violent offenders that were wanted already, and trying to pick them up and adjudicate their charges. So the first one I'm sure you're all aware of already was the 900 block of Hudson Avenue. It was the officer-involved shooting, so there's limited information I can say about that. But it did result in the arrest of Timothy Flowers, who was wanted for the triple shooting on Sumner Park off Monroe Avenue. The second one I'm sure you're already all aware of. We've all seen the videos. But that was on Remington Street. And that was two individuals were arrested. One was charged with criminal possession of a weapon for a handgun and also for assault on a police officer. The third one was on June 8th. A Jaquan Gaskin, who happened to be on parole at the time, was arrested on Ridgeway Avenue. He was charged with assault second, criminal possession of a weapon second, criminal possession of a weapon third for a shooting that occurred on Lyle Avenue back in April 15th. On June 11th, we arrested Philip Owens. He was arrested by the tactical unit and the SWAT unit. We recovered from him 6 grams of cocaine and a loaded handgun. He was charged with assault first, criminal possession of a weapon, for a shooting that occurred at 920 South Clinton Avenue on May 24th. So he was charged again on those, and then for items found during the search warrant. And then finally, on June 15th, a Tyreek Portia Blackwell was arrested by the Clinton section officers, charged with assault second, which is a felony assault, criminal possession of a weapon second, and criminal possession of a weapon third. And this was in relation to the double shooting that we had at 556 Norton Street back on June 3rd. So as you can see, we're making arrests, we're doing the best we can, but there's just a lot of this going on out there. I know Sheriff Baxter touched on some of the initiatives earlier today. What he didn't touch on is that we will be starting a joint impact detail next week. So you'll be seeing some state police resources and some Monroe County Sheriff's deputies on the street in conjunction with our officers. And again, targeting specific violent offenders and specific areas where we know that these problems have been identified. So thank you very much.
At this time, we'll take a few questions, and we're going to limit to how many questions we'll take, but we'll just open it up.
Chief, you said that you're going to be involving federal law enforcement partners in some of this enforcement. Can you outline some of those plans a little bit more and let the public know what sort of resources and what sort of help you've asked for, and then what sort of help you're hoping that is delivered?
Sure. With limits, obviously, we don't want to give away the playbook, but for the U.S. Attorney, the discussion is going to be how we would move forward with those criminal cases. What charges, which type of cases that they're going to target. For the U.S. Marshals, they've been assisting us with arresting wanted people. They're going to give us more resources so that we can go after even more people. With the Sheriff's Department and the State Police, the Deputy Chief had alluded to that to a certain extent, but that's your street type interdiction and activities. Again, I don't want to give away the playbook, but we try to work together and kind of support each other, where sometimes the sheriffs may need our support. I still am grateful for the entire Chiefs Council for this county for how they supported us during the most recent protest planning we did. So we try to reciprocate, but in this instance, this is an issue we all own, and we're all trying to work on it together. So.
Chief, did the mayor sign up on this request to bring in the feds, or are you making this decision on your own?
No, I try to be respectful of the responsibility the mayor has and keep her in the loop on any major incident. I think that's part of my job, and whoever's in that role, I would do that for. But certainly, I came to her with it, and she was on board, fully supportive. Again, we all, you've heard the council members, no one wants to see this, what we're dealing with. So we're all coming together on it, and we're united on that.
Chief, Sheriff Baxter mentioned earlier today that there is a gang problem in the city of Rochester. Do you agree with that? We're seeing a lot of targeted crimes here. Is there a gang problem in the city right now?
I'm not there yet on that. I do know there's some retaliatory type activities, but whether I can say yes, this gang has an issue with this one and why. No, I'm not ready to say. I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but for me, at the end of the day, what I'm looking at is I've got a woman who's been shot 20 times, shot at 20 times, and her kids are in the back seat, and so that's going to help our folks. That's going to help our major crimes and our section investigations, but for me, that's not my major focus. I want to find out how we get to those folks, how we arrest them, and how we keep them in custody. So again, I'm not going to tell you that we have no problem, but I know that a lot of this is works around retaliation, and so but to say gang and it's one gang going after another just because they're gang members, I have not heard that, and but we'll see. We'll wait and see.
Retaliation for what? You keep talking about that these shootings are all retaliatory. So
I said I've seen, from what I've seen, they're retaliatory in nature. So, so what we have then is, look at Garden Street, for example. Because it's an open case, so without going into detail on certain specifics, because they still have to do their investigatory work, but that implies retaliatory, 17 shots. But the reasoning on that retaliation, we're not there yet. And we'll be able to talk more about it once they make an arrest. And I'm confident our folks at the rate they've been working, that they're going to make an arrest.
Chief,
So
can you give us some
related to
information?
the C Street shooting?
I'm going to give you a chance. Go ahead.
Thank you. So to be clear about bringing in the federal agents, it's not just to support RPD, but you could be looking at federal charges to maybe get around bail reform and that kind of thing when we're talking about keeping people behind bars?
No, yeah, we're working together with our federal partners. Major focus on that is the U.S. Attorney's Office, because they would be the ones to bring what the charges are. Now, you mentioned specifically about bail reform. I can't tell you that this is a bail reform issue. I don't know that. And I can also tell you I speak to a lot of police chiefs, and the major goal there is that if someone commits a nonviolent offense, steals some items from a store, do they not need to be sitting in jail over several days? Most chiefs I know would agree with that. So that, to me, that's not a bail reform issue where you have nonviolent offenders that don't need to be locked up and aren't. My focus here is on the violent offenders with a gun violence history that get arrested more than once, and that, like I said, I want them in jail and I want them to stay there.
Chief,
So.
is there going to be heavier police presence or patrols on foot of sort and walking through the neighborhoods? We haven't seen that really much.
Well, I think you're going to see a little bit of that, but as I've said consistently, and I still feel that way, I will continue to feel that way, and our deputy chief alluded to that, is that I want us to go after the violent gun offenders that are terrorizing this community and leave the everyday people who are just trying to live their lives alone. And for many of those folks that I've talked to, it's exactly what they want as well. And I have to give the officers credit. We talk about the incident for Remington Street. That was exactly what they were doing. This was a violent offender who had shot several people and was targeted for arrest, and that was the end result. So those are the kinds of things I want to see. I want that to continue, and I want them behind bars where they can't hurt anybody else.
Chief, you alluded to this a little bit earlier, but can you just give us a little bit more information on the guy that pistol whipped the 2 women?
What? Well, on that charge, he was actually released again. And I don't know, I may, the last I knew, he was, Captain Umbrino, you want to talk about this? Are you prepared to discuss it?
He was brought back into custody.
It was? All right, why don't you come on up, Z, and why don't you fill him in a little bit? Because, they've heard it from me, my screaming and pounding on the table. So.
Afternoon. So in the case the chief references, it was an individual out on a murder charge, and city camera video and private surveillance video catches him pistol whipping a female rather intently, and actually points the gun at her and pulls the trigger, but for whatever reason the gun does not go off. He gets arrested by the responding officers. They recover the handgun, and he's released. And so from that, I think on behalf of the DA's office, they filed whatever notice they had to with the judge, who issued a warrant, and he was taken back in custody. If I remember correctly, our TAC unit might have been the ones that went and got him. So that's the case the chief is referencing.
Why was he let go originally? Was that due to bail reform stuff, the way the new laws work?
He was given a bail on a murder charge, which, in our opinion, I think most law enforcement, we wouldn't want that, right? That's a murder charge. That's one of the biggest charges he'll ever levy against somebody. So why would that person, and it's alleged, right? But for us to get to that point and indict them and arrest them, we have a case against them, and bail reform allows judges to give bail and allows some of these offenders to get out. And in his case, he was somebody that should not have been out.
What's his name and what murder are we referring to?
It's public, right? Craig Stanford? Mm-hmm. Craig Stanford.
And which murder are you speaking of?
Which murder?
Don't put me on the spot, Will. I can send it to you.
Thank you.
One last question, please.
Chief, can you explain more just about the need for the extra manpower when it comes to bringing in the sheriff's office? Why the need for the extra manpower right now? Is the crime really that bad in your eyes, or is there an understaffing issue as well? Why the need for more manpower in this case?
Well, first, one final point on that case. I believe he kind of taunted on Facebook and said, I'm not turning myself in because I may never see the light of day again, so you don't have to come and get me. So that's what we did, right? First of all, as Woman Chief, I'm going to say person power, officer power, and staffing. All right, okay. Yeah, I just said I'm chief now. I should be able to address that, right? So, no, here's the thing. If we're going to have a targeted approach, to have a safe approach to go after certain people that are clearly dangerous, have gun violence histories, you need a decent cadre of people to be able to do that. And I believe I mentioned to this group a while back when we had 72 Tiernan Street, where we had that barricaded gunman, we had a SWAT team out there for a bit. That took a lot of people. It was a decent amount of overtime, but guess what? Nobody got hurt. And if that's what it takes to keep the officers safe, the community members, in that case, we were in a residential neighborhood, you know, God forbid, if something got out of hand and people got hurt as a result. So that's what it's going to take for right now, to come at it the right way, to have a decent amount of staff that we can go after certain people and be comfortable that we've got enough resources deployed that we can take them into custody. I mean, think about it. You look at the Remington Street incident. Look how many officers were there, but look how hard it was still. I've been in some incidences, it's a little different, where maybe it's a family trouble, and it could be a 7 or a 10-year-old, and if they're wiry, and plus in this case it's a child, you don't want to hurt them, but it's tough. It's tough. But in that case, you had someone with 5 officers on him still trying to retain control of a handgun. I mean, what was he going to do with it? Shoot himself or shoot one of the officers? You have to have enough people right there to be able to react, and I support that fully. All right, last question though.
Thank you. To that, on that point though, violence might be the highest we've seen it in a long time, but so is anti-law enforcement sentiment, including in the city. Is having more, how do you walk that balance of bringing in more police, bringing in the Monroe County Sheriff's Office and federal agents without making people living in the city nervous?
Well, and that's a good question actually, but there are a couple of reasons for that. We may hear some of the louder voices that say that, but when you talk to people, those voices aren't the majority. People want to feel safe, and they want to be able to just live their lives without worrying. Parents want to be able to send their kids to school. I can speak to you as a parent. My daughter attended School of the Arts, and I remember saying this to a principal at one point, that when I send my daughter to school, I want her back the same way I gave her to you. I don't want to hear any excuses. And so I can relate to that. I talk regularly with the superintendent. She cares deeply about the kids, and we're going to work together to do what we can. I mean, I felt bad that they had to move their ceremonies inside. It was a beautiful day because they were worried about the kids, but she's got to protect them. So having said that, you've heard me say again and again, we are going after the violent gun offenders, and we're doing our best to leave the everyday people alone to live their lives. That's what the majority of the community folks I've talked to. I'm not telling you not to arrest the criminals. I'm just saying don't involve me in it. I've got nothing to do with it. When you build up enough of a relationship where people understand that that's our goal, we want the violent offenders, we want our community members who are just going to work, going to school, living their lives, we want them left alone, and they understand that, then they're going to do their best to work with us. I've gotten some great feedback on that. Will things all work out perfectly? I don't think it will. I mean, I'm trying to be realistic. But you've heard me. I will continue to tell you that we want the violent, gun-using violators off the streets, and we want our working people, our seniors who just want to sit out on the terrace with their friends to be left alone. That's all they want, and I don't think that's unreasonable. and we're going to do our best to give it to them.
One more
But
quick
thanks
one.
again for
As
coming.
interim chief,